That bit of music was from Elected by Alice Cooper. In this next set of 3 voting methods that I'm going to evaluate, I'm calling them preferential voting because in 2 of them, voters are able to show their relative preferences between the candidates, and in 1 of them, voters are able to show the preference for more than 1 candidate. Now, this is distinguished from the more common methods of voting that I discussed in the last segment, which all limited the voter to picking 1 candidate or 1 party. I'm going to use the same criteria of accountability, representativeness, and simplicity to evaluate these 3 methods, which are getting attention in the United States as possible replacements for the voting methods we're more familiar with. Approval voting is the simplest of the 3. You get a ballot that's similar to the one we're used to in the United States, where it lists out the candidates, but instead of picking just 1, you have the option of picking more than 1 candidate to give a vote to. And then the votes are added up, and whoever has the most votes wins. Pretty simple, easy to tell who the winner should be. The advantage here goes to voters who had some ambivalence between voting for an alternative party or independent candidate and still wanting to have a say in which of the 2 major parties would win the election. So it resolves that dilemma for them by saying you can vote for both, okay? But I don't think this is going to change the 2-party system very much for this reason, and that is that for all the ambivalent voters who are now voting for a major party when they might have liked to vote for a minor party, they're now going to be able to vote for both, so that increases the share of votes, that increases the number of votes for the alternative party candidate. But then the alternative party voters who chose that but still had some preference between the 2 major parties, they're also going to vote for both, meaning the vote total of the major parties are going to go up as well. My sense is it's going to end up with a 2-party system just like we have now. We don't have a lot of experience with this yet to see how it will go in practice. It was first proposed, I think, around 1971, and in the last 50 years, it's only been adopted in the last 5 and only in 2 cities, St. Louis, Missouri, and Fargo, North Dakota, and that's very recent, so they haven't had many elections yet. But because this is going to give the major parties a boost as well as the minor parties, I think you're still going to end up with a 2-party system. People will be keeping voting for the major parties because they keep winning, and on accountability, it'll still be hard to get rid of incumbents that there's disillusionment with because party affiliations will still trump those kind of desire to see the incumbent replaced on the part of that incumbent's party. And in terms of representativeness, there is some improvement because it gives a clearer picture of how many voters actually are attracted to alternative party candidates and independent candidates. So you get a sense of that. But those votes don't really count very much in the final outcome. It does give a broad sense of what the public wants because the final winner is going to be the choice of those voters that voted for him. Getting the most votes means there's going to be a lot of voters, but not necessarily a majority. Not good on that score. So slight improvement on one score of representativeness, maybe a slight decline on the other, but it has the virtue of being simple and easy to understand. Ranked choice voting is a system in which you can rank the candidates in your relative order of preference. Now, this is a system that there's a lot more experience with. It's been used for over 100 years in Australia, and it's been used for various offices in other countries as well. In the United States, over the past maybe 25 years or so, it's been spreading to more and more city and county elections. And in the last few years, it's been adopted by the states of Maine and Alaska for use in higher offices as well. So we do have a lot of experience with it. Now, here's how it works. Voters can rank candidates in the order of choice on their ballot, my first choice, second choice, third choice, and etc. And then in the initial counting, only those first choice rankings are counted. If a candidate gets the majority, it's over, that candidate won. If no candidate gets a majority, similar to top 2, there has to be a runoff. But here it's not a separate election, it's simply recounting the ballots, but first eliminating the candidate that got the fewest first choice votes and giving those ballots instead to each voter's next choice. And then counting again, majority, win, no majority, another round of counting, etc., etc., etc. Now, if there's a lot of candidates on the ballot, this could be a lot of rounds of counting. In most cases, it seems like first round of counting settles it, and that's because the two-party system persists. Most voters are going to one of two major parties, and that means it can be easily settled in the first round. Now, what it does do is it allows voters who are more attracted to alternative parties to now score that alternative party as their first choice, showing in the first round of counting what the real number of voters are who like those parties, and still say in their second choice that which major party candidate they preferred. So they can have it both ways, and it doesn't conflate the vote for the major party and minor party, your preference between them, because you've indicated your rank ordering. So I think it still results in a two-party system. Accountability is going to be hard. It's going to be hard to get rid of incumbents from the major parties. In terms of representativeness, it does give more show to which parties, which variety of parties voters do have some interest in, but those votes don't necessarily make a difference in the outcome because their candidates are going to be eliminated in one of the rounds. And broad support, yeah, it does, because it aggregates votes across these various party choices into a final winner that has a majority of what other ballots are left. Simplicity, it doesn't get a high score in this because if there are multiple rounds of counting, it's going to be hard for the average voter to kind of decipher what the meaning of each of those rounds of election are. Not impossible, but more difficult than other forms of voting. Finally, we have star voting, which is a variation of score voting. In score voting, instead of ranking the candidates, you give them each a score depending on your relative preference for them. Low score for those you really wouldn't like to win, higher scores for those you would like to see win. And this has the advantage that you could give two candidates the same score if you like them equally. Star voting, score then automatic runoff, adds a runoff to the system so that when the scores are added up, the top two candidates, the top two scoring candidates, then go to a runoff round, which is an automatic runoff, determining by looking at every ballot and saying which of those two candidates did that ballot give the higher score to, so that ballot goes to that candidate. So it's a majority winner in the second round. Star voting hasn't been used in any but a few experimental elections. There have been initiative campaigns to institute it at the city and county level, and in at least one Oregon county and one Oregon city as well, the city and the same county. So haven't seen too much of it in practice, but in theory it sounds good, at least to me. Here on accountability, because voters actually have a chance to show a much higher score for an alternative party candidate, there's a possibility that if that party can show that it's getting high scores, and it can attract more voters giving it higher scores and can actually displace a major party. Think of it this way. When you prefer a minor party candidate, an alternative party candidate, but you want to make sure you have a say between the two major party candidates, you can give your highest score a 5 to the alternative party, a 1 to the major party candidate you prefer, and a 0 to the major party candidate you don't want. That means when it comes to the scoring, you've given a big boost to your alternative party candidate, not such a boost to the major party candidate, and then in the final runoff round, if it comes down to the two major party candidates, you still showed your preference. So this does have the potential for giving alternative party candidates and independent candidates a bigger boost than ranked choice voting would. Accountability, I think it's feasible that it would be better at removing incumbents that people are dissatisfied with, because instead of giving them high scores, that party's voters might give them somewhat lower scores to indicate that they're not that happy with him or her. And in terms of representativeness, I think it has the best of both worlds because all the preferences are used, not just the top preference. A candidate who gets a lot of sort of high but not high scores actually has a chance of getting into the runoff. You know, a lot of 3s and 4s added up is as good as a smaller number of 5s added up. It gives voice to those voters' preferences for all the different parties. Actually, any party that you give a score to, that has some impact on the outcome, determining who will be in the runoff. And in the final runoff, it's a majority choice, so it also shows a broad voice on the part of the public, a unified voice on the part of the public. So best of both worlds. Simplicity, it's not the simplest method, but I think it's easier to explain than the result of ranked choice voting with multiple rounds. In STAR, it's simply which two candidates got the highest scores, and which of those two was preferred by the most voters. Easy to display, easy to understand.